So this is a weekly review, and I'm going to try to move through it very quickly. So last Sunday, there were two drones that crashed in the Kaluga region between Ukraine and Moscow. And then there was an RT profile of inside Ukraine's propaganda machine. And that's how it generally works, is that whatever the Russians are doing, they blame the Ukrainians for, or if you see something that says America's doing this, it's because Russia's doing that, and that's how it works. There was a hacker. This was fun. A hacker drained Russia's special services, all their crypto wallets, and then donated that money to Ukraine. That's pretty interesting. Prigozhin was refusing to obey a decree to sign military contracts. There's still this infighting, and ultimately Putin sided on the side of the Russian military, but you'll see how that plays out in a little bit. Ukrainian cities were obliterated in Russia's liberation. There was an article that talked all about that. RT said that the Russian senator Valentina Matviyenko says that Russia must end its illusions about the West. They just have to come to terms with this is how the West is going to treat us, because again, they're victims, right? The Ukrainian troops have excellent night vision devices now, and so that should help them some in this, but they have to find their breakthrough yet in the counteroffensive. So the first territory was recaptured in the counteroffensive at this point last week. Monday, there was Ukrainian losses of 16 armored vehicles, but they gained some territory, so there's a trade-off. We know that they're gaining ground. We don't know how many lives, and it's a little foggy how many vehicles they're losing in the process. RT says more than half the world's population supports Russia, according to Seymour Hersh. Now, if you haven't read Seymour Hersh, go back into my previous videos and just keyword Seymour Hersh, and you'll see where he was saying some nonsense about Zelensky was pocketing millions of dollars, and he's kind of a crank who can't see anything right that America ever does, and so he sides with the other side. Chechen forces signed a contract with the Russian MOD, which should be interesting because they're more flash than they are action, and we'll see how that plays out. Ukraine accuses Russia of destroying another dam, but this dam was a lot smaller, but yes, they did destroy another dam. There was on Tuesday a missile attack on Kyiv, that's Zelensky's hometown, and it killed 6 in the original reports, 10 in a later report, and I'm not sure what it is at this point right now. 30 or more wounded. More villages were liberated in the counteroffensive. Russia releases a video of captured German tanks. See, these German Nazis, or that was kind of what they were saying. Now, there were a couple interesting things about disinformation. New Zealand apologized for a Russian-biased reporting in their national public service broadcast, and they were working that out. How you present even facts could still be slanted, just like it could be slanted left-right in America. It could be slanted pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian in that news reporting, depending on who's writing it. France uncovered a Russian disinformation campaign. I did a whole video about that. You want to go back to Nothing to See Here. Putin denies claims of counteroffensive success. They're not having any success, and we're beating them 10-1. Really? Okay. There was a British historian. There was a great article in The Guardian, a British historian saying, we want to defeat Russia, but we don't want it to collapse. That's exactly right. You don't want it to collapse because very, very bad things can happen with a fragmented, collapsed Russia. I want to see Ukrainian children returned home. I do not want to see that it collapses and then there's just utter chaos. Okay, Wednesday, Russian Major General was killed in Ukraine. Ukrainian Marines are making some battlefield progress. The Trump indictment and the Dems are just dismissing as worthless the calls for a probe into Biden. But that's a really interesting thing. See, Biden, remember Trump, when he got into that first impeachment, was asking Zelensky to look into Burisma, which was related to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. If there's anything there, and I don't know that there is anything there, and I'm not going to be all Tucker Carlson-y about it, I'm just saying, if there is anything there, that could be really bad, because if there was any kind of shady deal, it would reflect so negatively on Ukraine. Now, Ukraine should be supported regardless of whatever happened there, because it's wrong for Russia to be doing what it's doing to Ukraine. But this could cast it in a whole different light, and so it's just something to watch. Ukraine failed to take the Machka assault, and there's a lot of counteroffensive challenges. Right now, they're just probing and trying to find their place into, and they've held back 50% of their forces in reserve. So when they do find a soft spot, they can then funnel their forces in and really start to punch through. Okay, the U.S. knew, according to RT, that Ukraine planned to destroy the Kakhovka Dam. Sure they did. RT also reported in the same day that Ukraine lost 75,000 troops since July 4th. We don't know what it is, but whatever Ukraine or whatever RT is putting out, I mentally discount by a large factor just because they lie about things. Reuters said that Russian soldiers' corpses were lining the road, which is kind of grim. Ukrainian Marine Corps vehicles were on display, but at the same time, the Ukrainian Marine ZMX-10RC, they didn't last long in the fight, and there's a reason for it. They're lightly armored. They're to move troops from one place to another. They're not meant for a frontal assault. That's what you have Leopard tanks for. Chechen commander was reported wounded, and Putin sides with the military over Wagner in that dispute. That's what we're just talking about. And Putin threatened to seize more territory in Ukraine if they keep up this bad behavior. So we'll see how that all plays out. On Thursday, we saw an article about the cost of war, and the Czech, not Chechenian, but the Czech Republic president was saying that Russians abroad should be monitored. Like, he's worried about that kind of thing. I'm not so much. I think that they just want to get away and they want to focus on their own lives, but there could be some. General Milley says that Russian forces are in disarray, and the counteroffensive is only getting started. Again, 50% of those forces are in reserve, and he also said in another article, I think the next day, that it's going to be a tough fight. So now here's something that was terrible. Azov prisoners are going to trial. It's a show trial in Russia, and I don't think it's going to go very well for them. Politico talks about it's going to be a long war. Politico is a magazine in the United States that just focuses on politics, and they have a very good feel for the pulse of things. And I think it's going to be a long war too. I don't think it'll be over anytime soon unless there's some amazing counteroffensive. And part of the problem with the counteroffensive is because of Kharkiv last year, where we had these sky-high expectations, where it really, there's not a lot of reason to have sky-high expectations. This kind of thing is a long, hard slog. Okay, now this was interesting. Western firms snubbed the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and it used to be like Davos in Russia. It used to be that kind of thing, and Western companies would come and they would be like, please let us do business in Russia, and we love Russia, and that kind of thing. And it's not so much like that anymore. They're being snubbed. Okay, so Friday, June 16th, UAE leaders were calling for dialogue. General Milley was saying that the offensive is going to be very difficult, as I just mentioned. Zelensky said that if Ukraine loses, either there's going to be a larger war or NATO might collapse, and both of those are very possible if Ukraine loses. This is why I can't understand American politicians who are like, nah, not our problem. You don't understand. This could be a huge problem for you. Okay, how long will the West support Ukraine? That's a good question. I've made the case that Ukraine is getting stronger over time, but I think there's a curvilinear kind of thing where it'll start to dip while Russia is getting weaker over time at the same time, but the support for the Ukraine from the West could wane, and that's what Putin is counting on. Okay, Ukraine is still fighting corruption at home, but this is the opportunity to do it. In RT, Putin says that Zelensky is a disgrace to Jewish people, and again, it's an RT, and this is Putin talking. So, the St. Petersburg Forum was going on. An African delegation was in Kyiv on the way to Moscow to meet with Putin, and they were greeted with missiles in Kyiv. Putin was still lighting up the sky, and so they got a good taste of that. And now this is the Saturday, June 17th. The African delegation offers mediation, and they're on their way to Moscow. We'll see if they can have any positive effect. I don't know. I don't think that they were so inclined toward helping Ukraine as getting peace so that food prices would drop and they would have less bad ramifications. But I don't think that they're going to convince Putin of anything. Biden said that he's not going to make it easier for Ukraine to join NATO, but by that he was just saying they have to meet the same standards. And Russia is facing a shortage of tanks, but again, they control the front lines. They've dug in. They have mines. They have those kind of things. So we'll see how that plays. Once they punch through, then you can see how the tanks versus tanks play out. Last article: Russia strikes Ukrainian decision-making center. Okay, well, that was an RT, so I'm not terribly worried about it. Okay, that's the news for the week. I try to do it as quickly as I could so that you'd be up to date. Thank you for watching this, and thank you for caring about Ukraine.